Today, a bombshell report from the New York Times. Papers say that Donald Trump asked Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker to have the Southern District of New York take over the case relating to the Michael Cohen probe. By the way, ally Geoffrey Berman, he would have been the lead of this probe if that had happened. The report goes on to say that Whitaker said, "No, I can't do this, Mr. President." That as Berman had already recused himself from the investigation. And then Trump reportedly didn't like the answer, and he soured on Whitaker, complaining about Whitaker's inability to pull levers at justice that could make the president's legal problems go away. Well, joining us now to discuss that and more, former federal prosecutor Roland Riopel. Roland, I don't know what's more shocking, that this doesn't shock the conscience anymore, that it just seems to make sense, or B, after everything that he tried to do with Sessions and the rest, that he still doesn't know that the Justice Department isn't his personal attorneys. I don't know which is worse, that he doesn't know better or that we're just normalized to this thing.
Well, Richard, this is just one more example of the way that Mr. Trump, who has grown up in a bubble, his whole life, he's had nothing but yes men around him. This is another example of why he is so ineffective in Washington, where you need to truly be able to negotiate and deal with opposing viewpoints and get people to do things that they don't want to do. You're right. He's just never going to understand that the Justice Department is an independent entity and does not work for him. And it's not shocking because we've seen this so often before.
Now, for some, they say, oh, this is just further evidence, of the kind of his MO. But I've heard other people, serious people, Roland, say when there are articles of impeachment, and clearly they believe this will be included in it among that this defines obstruction here, where you're trying to use your office to basically make a probe go away. Where do you put this revelation as it relates to a possible, obstruction charge?
This could be a count in articles of impeachment. It could be one article of impeachment. In a way, it's similar to the article returned against Richard Nixon when he tried to get the CIA to intervene with the FBI and put a stop to the investigation of him. This is kind of a similar type of situation. It is obstructive. It does demonstrate an unfitness for office, so it could be an article of impeachment, and if it's not, it's clear evidence of intent to obstruct the investigation, which may be relevant to other articles of impeachment.
A few other items, some from, the surreal to maybe some of more significance. One is apparently Lanny Davis reporting right now that Michael Cohen will, in fact, testify. And when he testifies, he's going to be bringing bombshells with him, talking about racist rants that his then employer, Donald Trump, said, and others. Is this just, basically, a catnip at this point, or does this stuff have any bearing on possible future charges against the president?
Well, it's certainly going to be a wonderful interlude of a clown show between Lanny Davis and his client. It sounds like we're going to have some very entertaining material there. But I do think Mr. Cohen was present at plenty of conversations and plenty of meetings that may well amount to obstruction, collusion, and material for an impeachment proceeding. So I do think there will be some substantive stuff there that is well worth paying attention to, but it'll be surrounded by a whole lot of wackiness. So stay tuned, Richard.
And because it's always seemingly a family affair in the Trump White House, this one surprised me a little bit. William Barr, his son-in-law, just left his job at Justice, not to leave because of perceived conflict of interest, but now directly to take a job in the White House counsel's office. I don't know, doesn't that sit a little strange for you as a possible real conflict of interest?
It sounds like there could potentially be a conflict of interest if Mr. Barr and his son-in-law are working on the same issues, but there would be a great deal that his son-in-law could do at the White House counsel's office that would have nothing to do directly with the doings at DOJ. And I suspect to avoid criticism the White House counsel's office will be very careful about the matters that Mr. Barr's son-in-law works on. But yeah, it's just another example of the way that so much has the stink of nepotism to it in the Trump White House. Hopefully it won't amount to anything.
So let's give the benefit of the doubt to this one, but on this next one, no way, no chance. I'm talking about Roger Stone. And the idiot, and that's the only word that comes to mind that I can say on TV, decides to have a posting where he puts a target next to the head of the judge that's presiding over his case. Now, she quickly basically summoned him to appear before this coming Thursday. Well, she'll decide whether or not she's going to revoke bail. Now, he puts tail between the legs and says, sorry, I apologize here, as if he's a 12-year-old. But nonetheless, you can't make this up.
No, and does anyone really believe this will be the last affront committed by Mr. Stone? I don't. His whole career has been made up of this kind of thing, and I think we can fairly expect that there'll be some other bit of outrageous conduct very soon, and I think he will offend the judge enough at some point that she will remand him. He's certainly done all he could to invoke her wrath. And I think he'll feel it.
And finally, you told us to keep an eye out for this one, that mystery country that was involved. Apparently, we're going to be learning sooner than later more about it, and it's involved here in tangentially with the Mueller probe. What should we be keeping an eye out for once we learn more of the details?
Just, whether the country provided some kind of conduit for the Russians to get information to the Trump campaign and vice versa. Was the country acting as a go-between? Was the country violating the campaign finance laws by funneling money to the Trump campaign in a concealed fashion? Those would be the issues that I think would be at the forefront of the investigation, and let's see if any of those things occurred.
And we will keep our eyes open. Roland, as always, my friend, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be with you, Richard.
And coming up next, a rift in the Democratic Party that is getting worse. I'm not talking about the pragmatists versus the progressives in the race for the presidency. I'm talking instead about the group that backed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in her stunning primary upset over Joe Crowley. Well, now they have their sights set on a slew of other members in Congress. This thing could get ugly.